A young man steps onto the world's biggest talent stage wearing a simple priest's collar, and within seconds the audience is whispering in confusion. No flashy outfit. No backstory video filled with tragedy. Just a quiet 22-year-old priest holding a microphone with trembling hands. Then he begins to sing, and before the first chorus ends, the judges are frozen, the crowd is crying, and the world is about to witness a miracle no one saw coming. If you believe that faith, music, and destiny can collide in the most unexpected way, make sure you subscribe now, because this is a story that will restore your belief in the power of the human voice. When the curtains slowly opened on the Got Talent stage that night, the audience expected the usual excitement. Dancers stretching backstage, singers whispering last-minute warm-ups, performers pacing with nervous smiles. What they did not expect was silence. A deep, almost sacred silence followed by the soft sound of footsteps. From the shadows emerged a young man in a black clerical shirt, a white collar around his neck, and eyes filled with both peace and fear. He looked barely older than a college student, yet he carried himself with the calm weight of someone who had already chosen a life of service. The host smiled politely but clearly surprised. The judges leaned forward. One of them whispered, "Is he really a priest?" The audience murmured, unsure whether this was part of an act or something entirely different. When asked his name, the young man spoke softly, introducing himself as Father Elias, only 22 years old, ordained less than a year ago. His voice was gentle, almost shy, and some people in the crowd smiled kindly, assuming this would be a sweet but forgettable moment. Then came the question everyone was thinking. Why did a priest come to a global talent show? Father Elias paused. His eyes moved across the massive theater, over thousands of strangers, cameras, and bright lights. He took a breath and said he came because music once saved his life, long before he ever wore a collar, and because he believed that God could speak through a song to people who might never step into a church. That answer alone shifted the atmosphere. The judges straightened in their seats. One of them asked what he would be singing. Father Elias replied that it was a song about forgiveness, written during the darkest moment of his life. A judge raised an eyebrow, clearly intrigued but still skeptical. Another judge smiled warmly and said, "Whenever you're ready." As the first note played, something unusual happened. The audience didn't clap. They didn't cheer. They went silent. Father Elias closed his eyes, and when he opened his mouth, a voice unlike anything anyone expected filled the room. It wasn't just strong or technically perfect. It was raw, aching, and filled with emotion that felt ancient, as if it carried generations of pain and hope within it. In the first few seconds, the judges' expressions changed completely. One judge's jaw slowly dropped. Another leaned back, hands covering their mouth. The crowd began to react not with noise, but with tears. You could see people wiping their eyes, shaking their heads in disbelief. But to understand why this moment mattered so deeply, you have to go back to where Father Elias came from. He was born in a small, forgotten town where opportunities were scarce and hardship was common. His father was a factory worker who lost his job when Elias was just 12. His mother worked long hours cleaning offices at night. Music was not encouraged in their home, not because it wasn't loved, but because survival came first. Elias learned early that dreams were luxuries. At 15, everything changed. One night, his older brother was caught in a violent incident that shook their entire community. The loss was sudden, brutal, and left a wound in Elias that words could not heal. He stopped talking much. He stopped singing altogether. Anger replaced joy, and questions about life, fairness, and God consumed him. It was during this period that Elias wandered into an empty church one afternoon, not out of faith, but because he needed a quiet place to breathe. An old piano sat in the corner, dusty and out of tune. He touched the keys without thinking, and for the first time since his brother's death, sound came out of him again. Not words, not tears, but music. That day marked the beginning of a strange and powerful journey. Elias began visiting the church every afternoon, playing and singing when no one was around. He wasn't trying to impress anyone. He wasn't performing. He was surviving. Slowly, his anger softened into something else. His grief transformed into compassion. His questions didn't disappear, but they deepened. A local priest noticed him one evening and listened quietly from the back pew. When Elias finished, embarrassed, he apologized. The priest didn't correct him. Instead, he said, "Your voice carries pain, but it also carries healing." Don't waste it. Those words stayed with him. Years later, Elias shocked everyone by choosing to enter seminary instead of pursuing music professionally. People told him he was throwing away a gift. Others said he could always sing in church and that should be enough. But Elias felt something stronger pulling him. He believed that his voice was not meant for fame, but for service. Still, the dream of reaching people through music never left him. Back on the Got Talent stage, the song reached its first chorus, and the theater seemed to breathe as one. Father Elias's voice rose, powerful yet controlled, filled with longing and forgiveness. The lyrics spoke of loss, of anger turned into grace, of choosing love when hate feels easier. One judge was openly crying now. Another whispered, "Oh my God," not as a figure of speech, but as a genuine reaction. The audience began to stand slowly, one by one, not clapping, but listening as if afraid to break the spell. Then came the twist no one expected. Midway through the song, the music softened, and Father Elias's voice cracked. For a moment, it seemed like nerves had finally caught up with him. The audience held its breath. But instead of stopping, he continued, singing even more quietly, even more honestly. Later, he would reveal that this part of the song was written the night he forgave the man responsible for his brother's death. That forgiveness didn't come easily. It came after years of anger, sleepless nights, and prayers filled with doubt. Singing those words on that stage wasn't just a performance. It was a confession. When the final note faded, there was silence again. A long, heavy silence. Then the entire theater erupted. The applause was thunderous. People stood, shouting, crying, clapping until their hands hurt. The judges rose to their feet, one after another, stunned beyond words. One judge finally spoke and said they had heard thousands of singers on that stage, but never someone who sang with such purpose. Another judge admitted they didn't know what they expected when a priest walked out, but whatever it was, this was far beyond it. A third judge said something that echoed around the world: "You didn't just sing a song. You gave us a moment we will never forget." Then came the biggest surprise of the night. Without warning, one judge reached for the golden buzzer. Time seemed to slow. Father Elias looked confused, almost frightened, as golden confetti exploded around him. He dropped to his knees, overwhelmed, hands covering his face as the crowd screamed. He later said that in that moment, he wasn't thinking about fame or winning. He was thinking about his brother, his parents, the quiet church with the broken piano, and the promise he made to use his voice for something greater than himself. The video went viral within hours. Millions watched. Comments flooded in from people who said they hadn't believed in God, in forgiveness, or even in kindness anymore, until they heard that song. Others said they weren't religious at all, but they felt something they couldn't explain. Of course, not everyone was supportive. Some critics questioned whether a priest should be on a talent show. Others accused the show of exploiting faith for ratings. But Father Elias responded calmly, saying he didn't come to preach religion, but to remind people that healing can come from unexpected places. As the competition continued, the pressure increased. Expectations were enormous. People wondered if his first performance was a once-in-a-lifetime moment or the beginning of something bigger. Father Elias struggled privately, questioning whether he belonged in such a world. Fame felt loud compared to the quiet life he had chosen. In the semi-finals, he almost withdrew. Late one night, he called his mother and told her he was afraid of losing himself. She reminded him of the boy who sang alone in an empty church just to survive another day. She told him that if his heart stayed the same, no stage could change who he was. That night, he decided to stay. His next performance was different. No dramatic lighting, no big arrangement, just his voice and a simple melody. It wasn't as explosive as the first, but it was honest. And honesty, once again, won hearts. By the time the finale arrived, Father Elias had become a symbol. Not just of faith, but of vulnerability, forgiveness, and courage. Whether he won or not almost didn't matter anymore. His message had already reached millions. When the season ended, he returned to his parish. He continued celebrating Mass, visiting the sick, and singing, sometimes to crowds of thousands, sometimes to just a handful of people. He refused record deals that didn't align with his values and chose carefully how his voice would be used. The world had tried to put him into a box, but Father Elias remained what he always was, a young man who found healing through music and wanted to share that healing with others. And maybe that's why his story resonated so deeply. Because in a world full of noise, one quiet voice stood up, sang from the soul, and reminded everyone that miracles don't always shout. Sometimes, they sing.